All right, so addition and subtraction of fractions is going to be our video for tonight. Um, Looking at both positive and negative values as well. So when we talk about fractions, before we get into addition and subtraction, the skills you're going to need, you're going to be able, basically need to be able to do two things with fractions to work with them. And the first is changing between mixed numbers and improper fractions. So if we look at this mixed number and this improper fraction, changing between the two forms, just as reminders, how do you get this? Sometimes you might want this in an improper fraction. We'll talk about why in a minute here. But if you remember what this means, so this means 2 and then 3 out of 7. So in order to figure out how many sevenths you had to begin with, it's like you had 2 full amounts and then you had 3 contributing, but not quite enough to make a full 7. Shortcut way is to say, okay, I'm going to do 2 times 7, so multiply here and then add to figure out how many sevenths I have. So 2 times 7, 14, plus 3, 17. So 17 sevenths. To go the other way, between improper fraction to mixed number, you're going to say, okay, how many times does 5 go into 24? Well, that's a full 4 times, and 4 times 5 is 20. So how many are left over? How many fifths are left over? Well, 4 fifths are left over. So 5 times 4 is 20, and 24 minus 20 is 4. So the 4 there and the 4 there. So obviously things you remember. The other skill you're going to need for fractions is simplifying. So a couple ways you can think of simplification. One way is you can just think, okay, what number goes into, because we always want every fraction answer we do this year, you're going to want it in simplest form. So what divides both 12 and 126? Well, I know 2 divides them. Maybe there's something bigger, but you give something that you know divides them. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. 126 divided by 2 is 63. Okay, is there still something that divides both of them? Well, how about 3? So 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 63 divided by 3 is 21. So simplifying fractions, changing between mixed numbers, and improper fractions, those are the skills you're going to need. Because when it comes to adding and subtracting fractions, the big thing you need to know is this idea, or the big thing you need to remember is this idea of common denominators. True for any addition or subtraction of fractions, whether you're dealing with something large and crazy. When it comes to the fractions, you're going to need common denominators. So to find the common denominators, there's kind of the short way and the long way. How do you get common denominators? Well, the only thing you could do is multiplying these denominators, and you can multiply one of them or you can multiply both of them. You just need them to be the same number. So I could think of, okay, what can I turn 9 and 4 into? Or you can sit there and list out the the multiples. You can use factors as well, but that would take a little bit longer. List out your multiples. So my multiples of 9, my multiples of 4, and this is going to take a little bit longer, until you get to a match. Oh, look, I can turn both of 9 and 4 into 36. Probably most of you have enough number sense that you can just say, okay, I know it's 36. So if I multiply, if I multiply this by 9, I have to multiply the numerator by 9 as well. If I multiply this by 4, I have to multiply the numerator by 4 as well. So the first thing you want to do is find the smallest common denominator for your two fractions. Smallest because you're trying to make this the easiest problem you can. So instead, my problem turns into 28 over 36 plus 9 over 36. So common denominators is the first step. Step 2, make those equivalent fractions with the numbers or denominator. So the equivalent fraction for 7/9, we already said, was 28/36. and the equivalent fraction for 1/4 is 9/36. Equivalent fraction, meaning we haven't changed those values, we're just writing them in a different form. So we have our fractions in our new form, and then step 3 is to add the numerators and keep the denominators. So to finish off the problem, the denominator's 36 stays the same, and then we add the numerator 28 and 9 gives me 37. From here, I am fine with you keeping this as your answer. If you want to change this into 1 and 136, that's fine too. Eventually, we'll get to cases where this answer will be preferred, and it'll be for a specific reason, but you'll see that later on. The one thing I want to say is, like, okay, just to remind you, why do you add the numerators and keep the denominator? Well, think about when you add up, we'll just do like a picture here. If you add up 1/4 plus 1/2 or 2/4, think about what you have now total. 1/4 plus 2/4. If we put those pieces together, you have 3/4 of the pie. It's not that you don't add both numerator and denominator. That should be step 4, sorry. Step 4, when it comes to fractions, is always going to be simplifying. Always look and see. So simplify doesn't have to mean change it into a mixed number. Simplify just means if there's any common factors, reduce the fraction. So I'm going to do a problem here from beginning to end, and then I'm going to give you some problems to try. So the I do here, you can follow along. What's my least common denominator here? Well, if I list out my factors, my multiples, wrong choice in words, 8, 16, 24, 32, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Finally, found a common multiple. You don't have to list these out. I'm just showing you in case you've kind of forgotten. But if so, I need to turn both of these into 24. So making my equivalent fractions, if I multiply the denominator by a number, I have to multiply the numerator by the same number to make equivalent fractions. So 3/8 becomes 9/24. 2/3 becomes, so minus 16/24. Now that I have my common denominators, step 3 is keep the denominator and then perform the problem that's in the numerator. So if it's addition, add. If it's subtraction, subtract. So 9 minus 16, or in other words, 9 plus negative 16 is negative 7. So negative 7 over 24, which you can also write with the negative sign out front. They're saying the exact same thing. So there's my example. Now you try. The only thing I want to say before you pause is the problems that we were doing had one thing in common. They were all fractions that just had a numerator and denominator. They didn't have a unit out front. So when we're doing addition subtraction problems, it's really going to be helpful if, and if this is true of multiplication and division as well, it's going to be helpful if you change these numbers into improper fractions first. So pause and go ahead and try the problem. So 2 1/8 becomes 17/8, and 5/6 stays the same. Our common denominator here is going to be 24, so times 3, times 3, times 4, times 4. So 17 times 3 is 51. 5/6 becomes 20/24. Add those together, and that's 71/24. And if you want to change it into mixed number, you can. That is 2 and, let's see, 71 minus 48, 23/24. So either one of those answers would be acceptable. The second one here, 4/7 and 2 1/5 becomes 11/5. So the common denominator here would be 35, so times 5 and times 7. So we have 20 35ths and minus 77 35ths, which leaves us with a negative number, negative 57 35ths, which would be negative 1 and 28 35ths. Let me double check that number, 57, because I did that pretty quick. Oh, not 27, 28, sorry, 22 35ths. I was thinking that looked a little off. That's why. All right, so addition, subtraction of fractions, common denominator. That's the reminder you need.